Hello. Welcome to another edition of the Technology, Innovation, and the Civil War course. I'm Dr. Nick Sambaluk, and today we have Dr. Bob Clark with the Army Cyber Institute. He is their legal expert, and he'll be talking a bit about legal innovations during the Civil War. So, Bob, thanks so much.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. We briefly talked about this earlier, and it's an interesting aspect that war, as we say, always seems to advance certain aspects of things in terms of weapons, medicine, and in law. And a lot of historians view the time of the Civil War as one of the largest advancements for law of armed conflict, although at the time it was called law of war from this part of it. And the main person behind this was good old Francis Lieber about this. He actually framed his experiences by being in the Prussian army and the atrocities he saw over there, and he fled Prussia, coming to the States about 20 years before the Civil War conflict period was going on. And at the time, he tried to get a job with a northern institution to teach political science and law from that aspect, and could not. And he ended up at the University of South Carolina, or the predecessor to that. I think it was called South Carolina College at the time. And of course, his views, being sympathetic to the states and slavery, didn't hold him in good stead with a lot of his colleagues. And so he pretty much headed out of that. And so when you study this, you learn certain aspects. Columbia Law School, being the prestigious university that it is, I did not realize that actually came into being right around the time of the Civil War, and he headed up to New York. It was actually, I think, in more of their political science section of teaching that part of political science for Columbia University, and then about a year later, around 1860-61, he went in and was teaching political science and law for their newly found law school. How this all came about and the advances for law of armed conflict at this time frame really had to do with a couple aspects. It had to deal with the dealing of slaves during the Civil War and how they were treated by the Confederate. But also, Francis Lieber was apparently looking for his son who was wounded in one of the battles, and sought the help of General Halleck, of the Union. And at the time, Halleck apparently was a lawyer pre-Civil War and had also written on law of war issues from that. And at the time, Halleck then became, we were talking about the
Commanding General of the Army.
Commanding General of the Army at that point in time. And so Lieber wrote him kind of a congratulatory letter saying, congratulations, oh, by the way, I've been studying about guerrilla warfare aspects, to which Halleck said, hey, I'm having a problem with that, can you write something? So he wrote a treatise up on that aspect of it that Halleck absolutely loved, and ordered apparently several thousand copies to distribute amongst his commands and generals. And ironically, that was one of the first parts where in that treatise it said the distinction between combatants and guerrillas were the wearing of uniforms, a command structure, and ironically the treatment of prisoners of war, which Halleck very much liked because the Union Army was having apparently a lot of troubles dealing with non-uniformed rebels fighting, which also led to, I think, in the writing of the code, the fact that the Union Army could, summarily execute them on the battlefield, which Lieber did not, he kind of shied away from, while held that it was legal, he believed it was legal, shied away from fearing retaliation aspects, as did Lincoln. Lincoln believed, I won't say he fully endorsed them or endorsed them, but he would rather commute the sentences as opposed to seeing those carrying out summarily, which clearly now, with our law of armed conflict, we do not adhere to. So there were a lot of principles that even came out under the Lieber Code that in today's standards we would find violations of the law of armed conflict. But after he wrote the guerrilla treatise from this aspect, he was asked by the Secretary of War to also write another treatise on the handling of slaves coming into the army, because the Confederates were treating them as criminals, and also either executing them or returning them back into slavery when they captured them. On that, so to go along really with the Emancipation Proclamation, they had the treatment of slaves coming into being used during wartime aspects. So he wrote that and was very interactive with a lot of the Lincoln administration staff, and that was the time that basically they asked him what to write what became General Order Number 100, which was the rewrite of the 1806 Law of Armed Conflict, or the Code of Law of War. So that was the Lieber Code. 157 codes developed into 10 different sections. Very interesting. Things of prohibited the killing of prisoners, prohibited the use of poison, interesting aspects of it. So it was really quite the extensive codification of customary international law, which also then became and formed the basis, almost lock, stock, and barrel, of the 1907 Hague Convention. They really took that and used that and ran with it to form the basis when they wrote the Hague Convention in 1907. So as we spoke, it's interesting that when you say how did the law of armed conflict integrate or interact with the Civil War period, a lot of times you would think, again, now my background being cyberspace, we're all looking at how does law of armed conflict apply to this new domain, this new tool and or weapon. So from that, I view more of this law of armed conflict and law of war, how it developed more with Lieber under the code that he wrote for Civil War, as opposed to specifically applying it to any particular weapon or means and methods that came out of the Civil War. Although, interestingly enough, from the research, Lieber apparently was right there along with his fellow Prussian von Clausewitz, in which when you look at military necessity and the amount of force that you can bring to bear to achieve your objectives, now we always really look heavily at collateral effects and a balancing between that. Lieber and von Clausewitz apparently did not have that much of a balancing to it. They almost believed that any force to achieve that military end, even giving what I guess means the collateral damage that could happen, because they believed harsh, very short wars were better for humanity to return back to peace. So the sooner you got that battle over with, the sooner you return to peace. An interesting perspective from that aspect of it. But Francis Lieber and his General Order Number 100, the codification, was clearly the huge advancements. And like I said, a lot of historians view this as probably the pinnacle of time for applying and actually codifying law of armed conflict.
Wow, cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm curious a little bit about also, you mentioned regarding illegal combatants, how Lieber felt that certain things might be legal, for example, the summary execution of prisoners, but probably not practicable in a truly actionable way. It wasn't going to work, and it seems interesting because that sounds like a sense of restraint. That might be, I guess, perhaps the exception that proves the rule, or maybe it dovetails in another way with Lieber's interest in going as full force as possible to end the war quickly. Is that am I reading something in there that might be a little bit different? Are there nuances that I should be aware of there that we should explore?
I think, well, again, it was interesting, his research and kind of dovetailing into the treatment of POWs. I think it has to really do with advancements in transportation type aspects of, now we have if I can remember the 5 S's of when we get prisoners of war: speed, safety, secure, and speed to the rear. From this aspect of it. In reading his aspects of the fact that you could not kill prisoners of war on that, and the summary execution of guerrillas on the battlefield, I think it comes with the aspect of one of the provisions are you can't kill prisoners of war. Of course, then there's an exception, unless the commander, because of a detriment to the military unit, and I almost read that possibly wrong to say, if it's a burden on the military unit to have to take care of these prisoners of war, and you have to move forward, you can kill them and keep moving forward. And my brain, under today's law of armed conflict, really cannot wrap myself around that conflict aspect of, now we take great means to secure prisoners of war. So to have Lieber write, you can't kill prisoners of war unless it has a detrimental effect on your unit, your military unit, as it's moving. Again, as a lawyer, those words, detrimental effect, you're like, okay, as a lawyer, I can drive a tank through that at that point in time, or a cavalry being period. So it was interesting and the challenges of the times that they worked with, given what we work with and what we've advanced to today. Again, it clearly formed the core basis of where we were moving and the codification of this, including the conventions that came out of it. But it was very interesting to see his view and his perspective. Again, going back to the cost fits aspect of, by any and all means necessary, given the constraint that we look at now.
Wow. Dr. Bob Clark, thank you so much. I sure appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for asking. Great to be here.